characterization. You know how it works even if you don't know the phrase. Characterization is pretty easy to remember because it has the word character embedded in it. Characterization is all about describing characters. Now that can be done poorly or it can be done well, but it's done. There are two major types of characterization. You have direct characterization and indirect characterization, and those work slightly differently to accomplish the same thing. Formally, characterization is the description of the distinctive nature or features of someone or something. There are two different types of characterization. There's direct and there's indirect. Essentially, I can say directly that a character is angry, and that's direct characterization. On the other hand, I can show you that the character is angry by something they say, by something they do, or something they think, and you, as the reader, infer this character is an angry person. Indirect characterization is a little bit more difficult because you have to infer from the words, thoughts, or actions of the characters in order to decide what the character is like. So one of my favorite examples, Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. Cormac McCarthy starts off with, "See the child. He is pale and thin. He wears a thin and ragged linen shirt." This is an example of direct characterization. The author directly states things that characterize this person. He says, pale and thin. He wears a thin and ragged linen shirt. These all directly describe what the character is doing. On the other hand, when the boy's father is described, there are some actions that lead you to infer something about the father. For instance, it says, "He lies in drink. He quotes from poets whose names are now lost. The boy crouches by the fire and watches him." It doesn't specifically say that the father is a drunk, but the fact that it says he lies in drink and it talks about his babbling, and from the fact that the boy is crouching as if he's afraid of his father, tell you that the relationship between the two is rocky, that the boy doesn't trust the father, and that could be from the fact that he drinks a lot. This, of course, leads the boy to run away. He travels down to New Orleans after a series of adventures. He goes to a bar where he is shot after getting in a fight in the bar. On a certain night, a Maltese boatswain shoots him in the back with a small pistol. Swinging to deal with the man, he is shot again just below the heart. The man flees, and he leans against the bar with the blood running out of his shirt. The others look away. After a while, he sits on the floor. There are a couple of indirect characterizations here. First, you can infer that the child is very tough, very resilient. The fact that he's shot and turns around to fight the man who shot him instead of collapsing like a normal person would. You can also indirectly characterize everybody else in the bar because they just resume what they're doing. You can indirectly characterize them as pitiless, as immune to violence, as numb to all of the violence that goes on around them. And this is something Cormac McCarthy does a lot. He does this in Blood Meridian. He does this in All the Pretty Horses. He does this in No Country for Old Men. He does this in Suttree and The Road. You can tell I have a little bit of a thing for Cormac McCarthy. His characters are very seldom directly characterized. Cormac McCarthy has them say less and do more. And you learn to understand them through what they do, not through how the author describes them. And this is a characteristic of great fiction. Good writers don't have to tell you things about their characters. When you look at the characters, you understand what they're like because their actions speak louder than any author's words could. In The Road, it's about a father and a son who are living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and Cormac McCarthy doesn't have to tell you how much the father loves his son. You see it in the way that he sacrifices and risks his life and would be willing to die for his son. You can infer that he's a loyal father. He doesn't need to come out and say he's a loyal father. It's not always going to be phrased in terms of direct characterization and indirect characterization. Sometimes they're going to use synonyms for that. You might hear them say, "How is the character portrayed in this story?" They might ask, How does the author picture the character or draw a picture of the character? What is the representation of this character? How does the author sketch out the character? There will be a lot of different words, but if it has to do with establishing something about the character, if it has to do with how can you describe or detail or give a description of a character, you can guarantee that it's going to be either be direct characterization or indirect characterization. The key word to look for to determine the difference between direct and indirect characterization is the word infer or imply. Anytime you see the word infer or imply, you know it has to be indirect characterization. It cannot be direct characterization. Direct characterization does not require any inferring. It is directly stated. In pop culture and movies, we see characterization a lot, but it's slightly different. If you ever have to analyze a film, what you're going to see is a more visual medium. Characterization is often shown through a visual component that you don't have when you're reading literature. In literature, you visualize the character in your mind, and the details and the words in the text have to create that image. When you're watching movies or a TV show, the visualization is already there. In a movie or a TV show, they act out the action, and from that action, you can interpret what kind of person they are. Now, in poorly made movies, they're going to use a lot more direct characterization. They're going to say things like, "I'm so angry right now," or "I don't understand what's going on," because the director isn't relying on the acting to communicate what the characters are like. In the same way, good literature is not going to have to use direct characterization all the time. They're going to give you actions, and from those actions, you can tell what the character is like. The better the movie or the better the literature, and the more advanced the reading level is, the more they're going to rely on indirect characterization instead of direct characterization. That's why so much literature is subject to your interpretation, because the way you perceive one character's action might not be the way somebody else perceives the character's action. The struggle is, tests don't take that into consideration. Tests give you a set of answers, and one of those has to be the characterization, which is why indirect characterization is so tricky on these multiple choice questions, because the way you see a character's behavior might not be the same way somebody else does. When you're looking at this on a test item, you have to think from the perspective of the test taker. You have to think, how am I supposed to perceive this character's actions, not how do I perceive this character's actions. Questions about characterization require you to read. You can't just randomly guess. This isn't giving you a short sentence. Characterization is about the overall feeling. Characterization is crucial to understanding the story. Characterization is the reason we come back to stories. It's the reason we empathize with characters, the reason we love characters. If there weren't any good characterization, we wouldn't be able to relate to people. We wouldn't be able to understand their struggles, and we would get bored very quickly.